Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I believe we'll go ahead and get, I will call to order the Salina City Commission special meeting. First of all, I would ask staff for confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been provided. Yes, thank you. With that, we will have roll call.
Mayor Hoppick?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hodges?
Here.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Franz?
Here.
Commissioner Ryan?
Here.
Okay. With that, would all that are able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. First of all, I want to outline a little bit about how this evening's event will go. This meeting is being done to the fact that we had a similar presentation done by Police Chief Nelson, and it was a 2 o'clock meeting, and there were some concerns that individuals had to work and would not able to make it, so we decided to have a meeting this evening at 7 o'clock. So those of you that have already heard Police Chief Nelson's presentation gets to hear it again. We'll see if he says the same thing twice, I guess. So after that, I will make a few remarks, and then we will open it up to the public for comments. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Police Chief Brad Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I am Brad Nelson. I've been your Chief of Police since December of 2013. Because of the topics for discussion, I believe it's relevant for you to know that I am a third-generation military veteran, having served 13 years in the Air Force Reserve. In addition, I have been a police officer for 36 years, and this is the third community I've had the pleasure to serve in. Mayor, fellow commissioners, I appreciate the opportunity to respond to the July 15th Sunflower Coalition policy proposal. A huge thanks to all of you that came here tonight, took time out of your evening to come here. I appreciate it greatly. I would ask that even though our audience may have opposing views, we maintain our decorum and treat others with respect. I truly believe that regardless of what path we choose, we will be a better community for having this discussion. Please heed Mayor Hoppick's advice, which is forthcoming, and I ask that you not put one of my officers in the position to ask somebody to leave because of their behavior. Please do not put us in that position. Thank you very much. These are the topics we'll have today. And again, if you've already seen this presentation, I apologize. I hope you took a look at it because we did post it online last week. And so I'm hoping that the majority of you have already read this PowerPoint presentation, so I don't have to spend a whole lot of time on each topic. I'm not a fan of death by PowerPoint. So I will go through the slides, but if you want me to slow down, please just say so. The two topics that we have tonight are the Federal Military 1033 Surplus Program, and of course the Civilian Review Board, otherwise more commonly known as a CRB proposal. And I want to say, to be clear, these are my thoughts, my proposals, right? We all have a boss, and I have a lot of bosses, but these are proposals that I think are the best fit for our city. 1033 Military Surplus Program. The name pretty much tells what it is, but basically our military has a lot of surplus equipment. They either have to destroy it, or they can sell it, or the things that will be beneficial to local law enforcement, they will give it. They give it away. They give it to folks. They give it to law enforcement agencies. To be clear, anything that you get from this program, we have to justify the need for it, and we have to demonstrate what we're going to do with it. So in other words, we can't ask for 75 rifles if we only have 13 cops. So people do look at this stuff. You just don't get everything you ask for. One thing that's not on this slide is that there's two different types of property that can be acquired. There's what's called controlled property. Controlled, that's what you possess on a loan basis. So the military is basically loaning it to you. This includes such thing as weapons, vehicles, and aircraft. That's what a lot of people are concerned about, the actual weapons, some of the vehicles like the armored personnel carriers. But I can say that less than 1% of everything the military gives out, less than 1% is actually small arms or armored vehicles. Again, less than 1%. The other type of property that the military gives away in this program is called non-controlled property, non-controlled. These are items that could be sold to anybody out there, to the general public, such as office equipment or hand tools, etc. In 2019, 92% of the items that the military gave out in this program was items such as office equipment, hand tools. It was not weapons and armored vehicles. I'm getting a huge echo here, but are you okay out there? Can you just give me... Adjust the volume or back up from the mic. Or take the mask off. I can't take the mask off. Okay, I will step back from the mic if that helps, but I am getting quite an echo up here. Can we turn it down a little bit if that's the problem? No, I think it's a little bit. Are you able to turn it down? Okay. Okay, thank you. I will say, as far as the next slide has to do with what's prohibited. In other words, what does the 1030 program, what will they not give you? These are the list of things they will not give you. And it's also things that they've really never given you. Part of the Sunflower Coalition policy proposal, they ask that we not acquire weaponized drones or grenades. And I can tell you the military surplus program has never given away weaponized drones or grenades. These have never been allowed under this program. As far as grenade launchers goes, that comes up a lot. At one point, we did have one grenade launcher. For you military folks, it was a M79 single-shot breech type grenade launcher. But when they give you these grenade launchers, the purpose that you state it's for is to deliver smoke or gas. They don't give you a case of grenades with your grenade launcher. They just give you the grenade launcher. Our involvement in the program, we've been involved in the program since the early 90s. It definitely precedes me. That tells you that's a total list of everything that we've received since we've been involved in the 1033 program. Everything that we received since then has been returned except for the APC. I stand corrected. The rifles, the 16 M16 rifles, those were actually transferred to the Salina County Sheriff's Department, but everything else has been returned. And when I say returned, that's because they were part of that controlled property program that I told you, controlled and non-controlled. Controlled is they're just loaning you these items, and they keep track of them every year. You have to tell them you still have the weapons. You can't get rid of the weapons. You can't sell the weapons. You can't destroy the weapons. The only way you get rid of them is give them back to the military. We have not acquired any property from the 1033 program since my arrival in 2013. This wasn't by choice. I think the 1033 program is a fabulous program, but if there's nothing that I see, that we see, that we need, we didn't acquire anything. That's the only reason. This is the purpose. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but it's basically putting an armored wall in front of the bad guy who may be shooting at you. Certainly, it also protects those that are inside this APC, and it protects those on the other side of the APC. I do believe that's pretty self-explanatory. There's been some raised eyebrows about the psychological factor, and I will talk about that shortly, but the psychological factor has to do with the suspect who are committing crimes, in my opinion. As far as concerns, this is a picture of our APC. It's a Puma. It's actually built on a Toyota chassis, and we received it in, I'm trying to remember, 2011, I believe. That's what ours looks like. Hopefully you've seen it out there, because we don't hide it. It's been in many training exercises. It's also been at many car shows and such, and just where people want to see it. And the reason we put it out there is so you know we have it, and hopefully you're conversing with people, officers who are driving it. And if you want to know why we have it, all you got to do is ask them. But I can say that I've been in my former job where I came from, I was on a SWAT team for 10 years, and I'm pretty confident I did over 400 SWAT operations. I'm not saying that makes me a subject matter expert, but I do know a lot about SWAT, and I do know a lot about the tools that the SWAT officers need to keep them safe and to keep you safe. And that's the primary purpose of any armored personnel carrier, is to keep my cops safe and to keep you safe. This is what we use the APC for, because even I listen to the radio occasionally, and I hear people saying we never use it. Why do we have it? Well, I can prove to you that's not true, because we actually have a log. We keep track of every time we use our APC. So I just went back to 2017 to show you what we've used it for. You have to train on it because, again, this is an 8-ton vehicle. This is a big vehicle. You have to train on how to get in it without hurting yourself, how to get out of it without hurting yourself, how to actually drive it. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. You just don't hand the keys to somebody and say, drive this 8-ton vehicle. We did last use it in March of this year. I was actually on that scene, and we were very happy to have it there. We actually oftentimes will put our hostage negotiator, we'll put him inside the APC, because that's about as safe as you can be, is inside an armored vehicle. He'll be on the PA, the public announcement system, until we can get some other kind of communication, such as a phone. But he'll be inside the APC, and he or she could not be any more protected. As found in the Sunflower Coalition policy proposal, these are their concerns with the 1033 program. And I've said it once, but I do want to be clear again that armored or weaponized drones and grenades have never been part of the program. And I find it hard to believe the United States government is ever going to give law enforcement weaponized drones, but I'm just saying that's never been part of it. After a lot of discussion amongst my command staff and just thoughts I had, this is what I'm proposing to the City Commission and to you citizens, is that by resolution, any future requests from the 1033 program by us will require commission approval in an open meeting. I definitely think that will result in better transparency. I mean, it'll come before the commission and they'll decide yay or nay on this proposal. It certainly gives more oversight and accountability, and that was my proposal, well then, and it's my proposal now, that I don't want to withdraw from the program because you just don't know what's going to be offered out there. We check periodically everything they offer. You can find it online. And at one point, I can tell you, our armored personnel carrier, it's 14 years old, okay? It's 14 years old. It doesn't have that many miles on it, but it has a lot of engine time running and such. And again, anything that's getting 14 years up is getting up in age, especially if we're wanting this thing to start when we need it to start and drive when we need it to drive. Realistically, I don't know if it'll be during my rest of my career here, but at some point in the near future, we are going to need a new APC. And if we shut this program completely down, we're going to have to get one elsewhere, and they go anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000, depending on what options you want on the APC. So we either come forth and ask the commissioners and you for $275,000 new APC, or we go to this military surplus program and see if they have any APCs that they will loan local law enforcement. I don't think at this point we're taking questions or comments. Mayor, is that correct?
It is correct.
Okay. And if I'm going too fast, please tell me. But this next, the next topic is the Citizens Review Board proposal. That's something we have had a, I don't want to jump ahead of myself in the slides, but we've had a Law Enforcement Advisory Board since 2007. So we've had a version of a CRB since 2007. We're just wanting to make a few tweaks in CRB, I believe is what we're looking for. You have to know where we came from to know how we got to today. Like I said, this all started in 2005 with legislation that told us as a first-class city we have to have a law enforcement advisory board. And that's what got ours started, because we are a first-class city. It also required all Kansas law enforcement agencies to adopt a detailed written policy to preempt racial profiling, and we certainly have done that every year since. As you can see there by the picture, hopefully you can see that. Those are 4 of our 5 present board members. Our board actually has seven people on it, but right now we only have 5, and we're not filling the other 2 till we see where this is going. Chief James D. Hill, he was the chief before me. He's the one who formed the LEAB along with Sheriff Kokonowski, I believe. They formed that, like I said, back in 2007. And their mission statement, it really did mirrored a lot of what the legislation said, which makes perfect sense. You just mirror what it says. First board meeting was back in May of 2007. Chief Hill definitely looked into whether or not we were subject to the Kansas Open Meetings Act or the Kansas Open Records Act. And at that time, back in 2007, the answer was no, they were not. And that's why it's not a open meeting as you know a commission hearing is, or how this is. It wasn't done, I don't think it was done on any, I don't think it was a secrecy issue. It's just back in 2007, because we're going back 13 years. It's just how it was done back then. And then you fast forward 13 years, and I can certainly see why there's issues with transparency, because it's not an open meeting. I really truly do get that. This is what the LEAB scope of work was back in 2007. It is a lot of review. I mean, review is the key word that you see there. And as you can see, there's no reference to reviewing bias-based complaints. And that's primarily any bias-based complaints we get since I've been here and before me. That is one of the things that the LEAB was doing, was reviewing bias-based complaints. I think over time, that just morphed into being the norm, where any bias-based policing complaint they get, this board will review it. I don't believe there's any ill intent. It's just how it was set up 13 years ago. This was the second change that happened in 2011. It basically said it took away the first-class city part, where you did not have to have a law enforcement advisory board, but it did require this annual reporting. I've never spoken to Chief Hill about this, but I would assume since we already had a law enforcement advisory board in place, they chose not to get rid of it. They just kept it as is. This is the mandatory bias-based policing report I spoke of previously. That's submitted every year to the Kansas Attorney General's office. And we have done that every year. That's required. This is what consists of the bias-based policing annual report. It's these 6 questions that we answer every year. Give you a chance to read those. When you get to question number 5, pay particular attention to that, because that did become a problem over the years since this legislation first occurred in 2011. Oh, go back. Sorry. I would say that question number 5 specifically says, does the agency have a racial or other bias-based policing comprehensive plan? And at that time, when I made this PowerPoint, I did check the block no. I'll go further on that here shortly. I will give Commissioner Hodges props. She's the one who was able to inform me that we are answering question 5 differently over the years. I will get to that here as to how that happened, but it was an error on our part, there's no question. This is specifically what question number 5 is. And I have no issues or no problems when we make a mistake. If we make a mistake, I'll own up to the mistake and we'll retrain and we'll move forward, because I think that's all we can do. But as far as that question, that specific question number 5, we did answer it. 4 years we answered it yes, and 4 years we answered it no. And the problem was we had 4 different staff members who were filling that out, and we were getting a little bit confused on a plan versus a policy. We've had a policy for a long time, since 2003, but as far as the plan, that's something we just recently began working towards. This plan, the comprehensive plan, it is optional, so you don't have to do it. It's good to have, but again, you don't have to have it. You do submit it to the Attorney General. They say that they review it, but it's submitted to the Attorney General each year in July. And I spoke previously that we had submitted it 8 times, and 4 times we said yes, and 4 times we said no. But the answer, what I can say now is we have gathered the information that constitutes a comprehensive plan. We have put that all together in an actual plan type report that we are looking at now, and we do plan to submit that in July of 2021, a comprehensive plan. And those are the questions that we have to answer for the comprehensive plan. So a lot of information on the slide. I don't want to go too fast. Are we good? These are the options that we first had we had a listening session back in June. And as far as the CRB goes, the options that we had were to continue it as it was, status quo, by commission action, recognize and approve the LEAB as a city board. Or number 3, consider the formation of a Citizens Review Board, CRB. They have many, many different names, but most commonly known as the CRB. Which would abolish the LEAB. On July 22nd, I was given instructions to submit a CRB proposal, and that's what we've been working on quite a bit since then. We looked at a whole lot of information, because there's a whole lot of information out there about citizens review boards. Those are the main ones we looked at. I can say they were all helpful to help me gain knowledge, but also with this PowerPoint presentation, they were quite helpful. One thing I didn't add is the department I came from, I wasn't the chief there, but I was a captain there, and they did have a citizens review board formed while I was there too. So I have some knowledge about CRBs, but I would say if you're gonna go home and Google anything, Google the NACOL, National Association for Civilian Oversight for Law Enforcement. That was very, very helpful. I looked at the NAACP site, found some useful information. I did like that. That's why I put it on the slide. I did like that statement there. An independent civilian complaints review board is necessary to ensure that the community is engaged in addressing police misconduct. I kind of wish it would say alleged misconduct, but that's just me as a police officer. But the quote is exactly addressing police misconduct. Obviously, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so I wanted to look at what other agencies were doing, other cities were doing, and we decided on the top 10 largest cities in Kansas. Salina is ranked number 10 presently. For that reason, we also added Hutchinson, so we actually we did look at 10 agencies. Hutchinson is very close, pretty close in size to our community, and it's close to our community. That's why we chose Hutch. Hutchinson and Shawnee do not presently have a CRB, but are working towards forming one. Kansas City, Kansas PD did not respond to our request for information. I was very, very surprised by how many of these different CRBs that I looked at, and if you notice, that's 7 or 8 different names. They're not even named the same. I mean, it's just different wherever you look. But I was pretty surprised by 3 or 4 of these appear to be extremely similar to what our present board is now, our Law Enforcement Advisory Board. This is the main issues that the Sunflower Coalition has with our present LEAB. as far as the limited scope, that was a concern with they're only looking at bias-based policing complaints and nothing else beside that. The others, I believe, are pretty self-explanatory. This information came from Nicole, the organization I spoke of earlier. Probably the biggie there is it's civilian oversight. It's involves active participation in the above by persons who are not sworn law enforcement. This is what, when I looked at all these different CRBs in Kansas, this is some of the things that I thought were, some of the wording was very similar, and there were many differences, but there were also several constants, and I tried to list those that struck me as being the differences there. It was interesting. I found examples of all of them choosing who's on the board, city manager, mayor, or the police chief. And I understand why you probably don't want your police chief choosing who's on the law enforcement board, because it would look like you're just picking people who are pro this or against that, and I get that part. Board members anywhere from 7 to 15. The residency requirements was interesting because some said just in the city that the police department was at, some said the entire county, some said if you have a business in the city but you live anywhere else you can join them. It's interesting all the different types of board requirements that I saw. Those constants, the post-review, so by post-review, I mean the incidents happen, it's been investigated by internal affairs professional investigators, and that's after that it's reviewed. None of the ones I found had subpoena powers or independent investigation. Absolutely, because they're personnel type issues, they're confidential. Best fit versus best practice. I mean, we talk a lot about best practice. It's probably overused to some extent. And what I read, there wasn't really a best practice because all communities are different. All communities either have CRBs or don't have CRBs, but their reasons for having them, the catalyst, maybe some tragic event happened. You know, thankfully there hasn't been a tragic event that's happened here, but a lot of times that's the catalyst for these CRBs. So you can't compare yourself to Detroit. You can't do what Chicago does. You just can't take any city and just take their CRB and say that'll fit in Salina, Kansas, because it doesn't work like that. As far as the least intrusive means of oversight, I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but I think it's a good point to say that just as the public demands officers use the least force to obtain compliance. In other words, if you will voluntarily comply to me telling you you're under arrest, I will not use any force, right? That's the least force necessary to obtain compliance. Well, with that thought, the CRBs, Citizens Review Boards, should have the authority that is required to maintain law enforcement legitimacy, but not to be engaged in the day-to-day operations of a police department. That was found on that site, and I took that to heart. Another analogy is it's the same reason we do not need the APC brought out for routine calls for service. In other words, if you have a call of a shoplifter, you're not going to roll up in the 8-ton APC because there's no need to. In my opinion, based on 36 years of law enforcement in 3 communities, there has not been a demonstrated need for a CRB in our community with subpoena powers, investigative powers, or discipline decision-making authority as described in the Sunflower Coalition proposal. I just don't feel there's been a need shown for that. This is the ways you can make a complaint on one of my officers, one of your officers. There's a multitude of ways, as I've listed, I think everything I could think of, we could think of there. I can tell you when I started being a police officer in 1984, you couldn't email one. We did not take anonymous complaints, but all that's changed. But everything listed there, that's how you can make a complaint against a police officer here in Salina. I just captured this. This is our online complaint form. I was pointing at the screen there, but if you can see in the left side, there's a way to also offer commendations too. So it's not just complaints, but you click on that and you can make an online complaint or commendation while you're sitting at home. A lot of people have asked me how many bias-based policing complaints have we received, and I used to not know the number, but I'd always say, well, not many, because I knew it wasn't many. But I can tell you, in the last 13 years, we've received a total of 11 complaints, and that's obviously less than one a year. It's came up before that there may or may not be a certain segment that doesn't want to make a complaint, but I don't know how I can capture that number other than just say people brought that to my attention. But again, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I can just tell you the facts, and the facts are that we've had 11 bias-based complaints in the past 13 years. In the same 13-year period, we had 33 total use of force complaints. And when I say use of force complaints, somebody's complaining that we use excessive force or we use the wrong force. But that's 33 times in 13 years, which works out to be roughly 2.5 complaints per year. And I think most of you know, but a use of force can be anything from, if I put hands on you, that's a use of force. If I grab your wrist, that's a use of force. If I do a leg sweep, obviously that's a use of force. The use of OC, any strikes with batons, tasers, it's all captured because the officers have to do a use of force report. So we have all those numbers. We can tell you exactly how many times a Salina police officer has used force in the last, however back you want to go. As far as our contacts with citizens, in the past 5 years, we've averaged over 44,000 calls for service per year. So 44,000 times we've went to a call, or we've had a self-initiated call. A self-initiated call would be, I stop you on a car stop, or I check you in the park because the park's already closed. Those are self-initiated calls. But with that number of 44,000, I'm very, very confident it's considerably higher, because when we arrive on the scene, there's oftentimes more than one person. There's multiple people, but we don't capture all those other people. It's just the one who called to get us there. I can tell you that in those 5 years I spoke of, from 2015 to 2019, we responded to over 222,000 calls. I'll try not to bore you with numbers, but 222,000 plus calls in these past 5 years, and we used force 872 times. 872 of 222,000 represents 0.4%. So 0.4% of the time that we encounter people, our officers are using force. 0.4. Obviously, another way to look at that is that you stand a 99.6% chance of us not using force. 99.6% chance. When I was discussing the best fit versus best practice, when forming a CRB a few slides ago, I mentioned that the least intrusive form of a CRB was recommended. Well, again, it's 99.6% of the time we do not use force on you. I can say in my years as being a police officer, the most dangerous times for us, probably two things, but upon arrival, when you're first getting out of the car, but number two, the most dangerous, probably number one, the most dangerous is when you tell somebody they're under arrest. Because that's everybody's heard of the fight or flight. We all understand fight or flight. Of course, I come. You're either fight or flight. You're either going to comply, you're going to fight me, or you're going to try to run away. So those are the magic words. Like I said, is that you're under arrest. One number I didn't use last time, but I can tell you, if we did place you under arrest, I'm not expecting anybody to know this because I didn't know it either, but if we do arrest you, we use force in 8% of our interactions. So 92% of the time when we're making an arrest, we do not use force. 8% of the time we do use force over the past 5 years. With that said, this is the meat of the PowerPoint presentation. These are the models I looked at. These are the models, the primary models that are out there. Review focus model, investigation focus model, auditor, monitor, focus model, and the hybrid model. I did like that quote there, reviewing completed internal affairs investigation is the most common oversight function across all model types, sorry. This is the first model I looked at, review focus model. Pretty clear. That is the most common model out there, is the review focus model. This is the investigation focus model. This is huge departments use this. I use example there of New York Police Department. That is a big, I used to know the number, 30,000 or so. They have a lot of police officers, but that's a very large police department, and they use this investigation focus model. And that's where they have civilian-led investigators. They have their own offices. I mean, it's not in-house. It's not done by internal affairs folks. It's not even done by police officers. It's done by civilians. Auditor monitor focus model. This also this takes a lot of resources to run this. I mean, just the term auditor to me tells me it's going to cost some money. Requires significant resources for dedicated auditing and monitoring staff. That's certainly true, I read there. And finally, we have the hybrid model, which is pretty self-explanatory what the hybrid model is, but you can take what you feel would be the best fit for your community out of the previous three models. It is becoming increasingly common. And this is what I have proposed to you, that I propose to our commissioners, is that we adopt a version of the review-focused model. It's certainly going to be structured just like the other City of Salina public boards. The members are chosen. Well, the members submit. If you wish to be on a board, you submit your desire to be on the board. I believe the mayor has the first pass, and then the mayor presents folks he would like on the board to the commissioners, and it's my understanding the commissioners vote on these people individually. We definitely, this review focus model, we would definitely be subject to the CORA, Kansas Open Records Act, and the COMA, Kansas Open Meetings Act. That would increase our transparency greatly, just because we would subject ourselves to that. Main thing they do, review completed investigations and provide feedback to the chief of police regarding specific complaints received from the community. They would submit an annual report. This is found in our present bylaws, LEAB bylaws, and it seemed like a good thing in 2007, and I certainly think it's a good thing in 2020. This is further information as far as the proposed scope of work. Probably the most relevant information on this slide is that I would provide the board with completed investigations and resolutions of complaints regarding bias-based policing and use of force. As far as any SPD officer involved shootings, and as much as I would like to say it doesn't happen here, we've had 3 happen in the last 18 months. That is something that once the investigation was completed by the KBI, I say the KBI, that's because the KBI has agreed to investigate all of our officer involved shootings, but they investigate them at their pace. They are very, very good at what they do. And then once they complete the investigation, they give it to the county attorney's office for review. Once that's done, that's when we can discuss it with the CRB members. Some more items, more bullets on the scope of work. That quote came straight from Lawrence, Kansas CRB bylaws there at the bottom. I do strongly believe that this model, the review focus model proposal, addresses the majority of the identified shortcomings with the present Law Enforcement Advisory Board as described in the Sunflower Coalition policy proposal. It's certainly not everything they asked for. I mean, there are some things that I just cannot support. And I could say this, I want to be perfectly clear. I am not in favor of outsourcing any discipline and or investigative authority to a civilian review board. As far as the 4 shortcomings that the Sunflower Coalition identified, scope, it broadens the range of review from just bias-based policing to include use of force complaints. It also authorizes the review and recommended changes to all public disseminated policy. As far as authority, it provides additional authority in the form of an annual report regarding reviews by the board. By that, I think the best example I could say, if I review something and I say this officer did what was proper, and then the CRB members review it, and if 10 times out of 10 they disagree with my decision, we got a problem, and we need to talk about that. Either I'm doing something wrong, or they're not comprehending, or somewhere in the middle, I'm not sure. But each year, the CRB will complete an annual report regarding the reviews they did for the police department, for the city that year. Transparency, that's probably the biggest change by far. If this CRB proposal is accepted, I think it increases transparency tenfold by, again, being subject to the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act. As far as membership, this will be decided by the commission, but members self-perpetuating themselves to be on the board will cease. I do think this is relevant because when this LEAB started, Law Enforcement Advisory Board, in 2007, it was a joint venture between the city and the county. And I hope I'm right, Sheriff Kokonowski, in 2007, I believe that's correct. He was part of this from day one, along with Chief James Hill. And for that reason, I asked the Sheriff, Solden, is this something you'd be interested in participating in if we have a Citizens Review Board that's appointed by the city? And his response verbatim is as follows: it has been my experience that a majority of the complaints that have been received involved unresolved criminal investigations. As such, I will not participate in an open public discussion of the details of any such investigation. Personnel matters involving Sheriff's Office employees will not be held in a public setting. As the elected sheriff, it is my responsibility to administer disciplinary measures taken against Sheriff's Office employees when appropriate. I do not take this responsibility lightly and will not turn it over to a group of appointed citizens. So I would assume that's a resounding no, but it would be a city, they would review city-only actions, and it would not involve the county per se. If accepted, this CRB would be for the Salina Police Department review of our actions. And it's not anything new. There's always been other avenues to file a complaint, and these are the two avenues that came to mind immediately as far as being the most useful. You can make a complaint to the Kansas Attorney General's office. You always have been able to. There's a website there where you can make an online complaint, or you can make a complaint to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation about a specific department or even a specific officer. Oftentimes they'll kick it back to us to ask us what the issue is to see if they want to go further. But my point of putting that slide there is there are other avenues than just staying in Salina. If you're not happy with what I'm doing regarding discipline or regarding reviews, there's always other avenues. And that is the completion of my PowerPoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Nelson. I'll try to find the place where I can be heard. Is that okay? Can everyone understand me? As you can tell, Chief Nelson has put a lot of work into this presentation, and we appreciate that. As we move forward, we will be leaning heavily on Chief Nelson and his staff to help us with the implementation of the review board. We do have an excellent police department, a dedicated staff, and being a police officer in today's society is not easy at all. In fact, we ask the men and women in the field to wear many hats, and it's something different every day, and I think they handle it very professionally, and we're lucky to have that. I want to update everyone a little bit as to where we are based on some of the comments that Chief Nelson made. There is, if you were at the meeting we had at 2 o'clock, our study session a few weeks ago, you would have heard that there is a consensus among the current commissioners to continue to be a part of the 1033 program. The only change that we will probably be looking to make is that we would ask that Chief Nelson and his department bring any recommendations for purchases to the City Commission prior to purchasing those items. We also are in favor of keeping the armored personnel carrier. This personnel carrier is there for the protection of our police department, as Chief Nelson mentioned, and also of the civilians that may be in a situation that they wish not to be in. How many of you, before we started these discussions within the last 6 months, even knew that we had a law enforcement advisory board? That's been around for 13 years, and a lot of people didn't even know we had that. The way we ought to look at the new Citizens Review Board is that basically what we are looking to do is make a modification to the current LEAB board. You know, there's nothing wrong with reviewing a board and tweaking and making changes after 13 years, and I believe that's what we're looking to do, and we're looking to do that with the help of the police chief and his staff. One of the things that we have to weigh as we look at this is, confidentiality of not only the police officers, but those that might file a complaint, transparency, and while falling under the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act. So there's a lot of things that we have to weigh there to make this work. And what we have to do, and I think Police Chief Nelson said this, is we have to find out what is the best fit for Salina. I think there's some misconceptions out there a little bit of kind of where we're at in this process. I want everyone to know that the commission is working with the Salina Police Department, not against the Salina Police Department. No one up here, and if I'm wrong, please raise your hand if you're a commissioner and you are looking to defund the police. Again, there's a consensus that our police department needs to be well funded. In fact, Chief Nelson, I think we are probably as close as we've been to being full staff for many years, and that's a good thing. To give you an idea of the support that this commission has for the Salina Police Department, and not only previous commissions, is we just finished spending nearly $6 million on a new training facility. And I wish we didn't have COVID-19 going on. We'd have an open house so you could all come out and see that. In fact, we'll do that as soon as we figure a way to do it safely. But within that new training facility is a new shooting range, which is first class. It has a classroom, storage area for equipment and vehicles, and also, thanks to the Police Excellence Fund, it has a simulator that will help our police force to be one of the best trained police forces, not only in Kansas, but in the United States. So that is the type of support that we are giving to the police department, and where we want to continue to see them to be able to be trained so that they will protect us as a community, but they will also go home to their families safe at the end of the day. Those are the comments that I wanted to make, and what we're really here for tonight is to open it up to the public for comments. What we'll do is we will ask you to come to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. Please give your name and where you're from. This will not be a question and answer format, so what we'll do is just ask you to make comments. Again, to follow up on Police Chief Nelson's comments, we ask that you please respect all speakers, even if we don't agree with them. We're going to try to handle this as professionally as possible, and appreciate that. And who would like to be first? And also, you can line up 6 feet apart or just come up as we finish. Yes. And around this. Okay.
My name is Jim Vint, and I live at 1115 Andrew Avenue, Salina, Kansas. And I did notice that during the previous speaker's presentation, he omitted one means of challenging police behavior, and that is 42 U.S.C. 1983. Federal law that gives the citizens the right to sue the cops. And I'm quite familiar with that statute because I used it when I sued the Salina Police Department, sued 3 individual officers and the City Commission. This was when Bob Frank was the mayor. So I sued him for illegal stop, illegal search, and illegal arrest. So I saw firsthand the answers that the police officers signed under oath to my interrogatories. And I'm here to tell you, at least back when this happened, this was in 1990, ancient history. Have things changed that much? I doubt it. Cops lie under oath. I wouldn't trust a Salina Police Department officer as far as I could throw that armored personnel carrier. Some of their lies were laughable, literally, such as they said, well, we didn't actually arrest Mr. Vint. We told him that if he didn't identify himself, he was going to have to go down to the police station with us, and he said fine, so that shows we didn't arrest him. He said it was fine. Well, when my lawyer saw that, he literally laughed, and he said, if they want to try to sell that one to a jury, be my guest. Well, they didn't. The City Commission passed an ordinance that was dictated to them word for word by my attorney, which was taken from the Supreme Court case Terry versus Ohio. And then they paid an out-of-court settlement, the city's insurance company did, which was tax-free, by the way. That's what good lawyers are for. So this business of, oh, well, trust us, everything needs to be under supervision of the police, I don't buy it.
Thank you. Next.
My name's Matthew Newbanks. I'm from here in Salina. Do I have to give my address? No? Okay, thank you. Point one, I'm already want to address the 1033 program. Thank you for not going away from that. That saves the taxpayers money and protects our officers with which is the most dangerous time to be a cop in American history. If you look at nationwide, there are protests going on assaulting law enforcement officers all the time. And, a lot of people say, oh, this is Salina, Kansas, it's not going to happen here. We've already had cops shot this year from Salina. We've had protesters attempting to block traffic. Last weekend, a cop was shot in Colby, and a cop was shot in Lyons. It can happen here, and I'm glad you're going to protect our cops and keep those equipment. Number two, we're looking at the document. This is an incredibly poor written document. A couple of my questions. If you're looking at section 1, subsection 1B, all meetings must have a citizens forum where public speak grievances that may have and alert any possible problems, I assume with the police. Does this mean that I can show up and I'm going to use Officer John Smith? If there is an Officer John Smith, I apologize. But can I just accuse him of raping me in the back of these cards? Is there any burden of proof on this? Are our officers now going to be guilty until proven innocent by this review board? Oh man, time's ticking down fast. We're looking at subsection 1, subsection 4, item B. What policies is this board going to react? If you look at the investigatory powers, you want civilians with absolutely no investigative power to have the power to determine what our police chief does. Then they want to, in section 3, subsection A, look at punishment. So if Officer John Smith is late for work, that's a violation of the police department. Does the chief of police have to call over to the citizens review board and see what he can do to punish that officer? Next policy point I want to make is if you look at, they want to be able to subpoena documents from the Salina Police Department. Does that mean they're going to get my social security number or my bank account number when they look at that documentation of crimes? If so, you're opening up the city to lawsuits. I want to bring statistical information into this. Over the past 5 years, we're average about 15 complaints, over 200,000 police interactions. According to the FBI, per police interaction in billeted cases, officer averages about 20 interactions per billeted case. Cutting that in half down to 10%, so that's 10 public interactions for every billeted case. And we've had 15 complaints in the last year. That is 0.00075% complaints per interaction with the police. If you look at that, that is less than 1 complaint per 100,000 interactions with the police. You're looking at the interactions per police, even if 10 people were scared to come forward and complain about the police, that is still 10,000 interactions with less than 1 complaint. That's less than 1 complaint per 10,000 interactions, assuming that the complaint rate would be 10 times higher than it actually is. For an organization such as the Sunflower Coalition who wants to be transparent, they're certainly not transparent about their members list or their beliefs. If you do a quick Google search and Facebook search on them, you can't find a members list, you can't find what they stand for. And in fact, the only thing you can find is that one of the leaders who have put on multiple protests in town, Mariana Bachman, she's the only actually confirmed member I can find. She has been arrested multiple times in Salina, Kansas. She was in jail from 2009 to 2011 on drug charges, grid security level 4. I don't know what that means, but she was in prison for that. And you are wanting this board to be possibly filled with criminals to give power over the police? That's insane. Lastly, moving back to the document, I'm trying to hurry up. I apologize for taking excess time. If you look at section 1, subsection 2 of the document, having relatives on a police member and any private group that donates the funds should not be allowed on the CRB. What about people in jail? What about people with criminal history? What about people with friends and family in jail that have an axe to grind against the police department? Are they going to be allowed on the CRB? This document doesn't state anything. It's just a laundry list of wishes and demands.
So you're 3 minutes up. I guess the beeper's not working.
Now, beeper's not working, but
Okay.
in closing, you're going to hand over control of the Salina Police Department's investigative and powers of punishment to a board filled with civilians and possible criminals. We, the law-abiding citizens of Salina, don't want this.
Okay, that's,
Love our Salina Police Department. Thank you for your service, guys.
thank you. Please.
Hello, my name is Karen Wadke. I live in Salina. Yes, yes.
Can you pull the microphone down close to your mouth, please?
Does this help? It seems to me there is a large factor that's being completely ignored in this issue. We need to consider both sides. I do think the Sunflower Coalition has a part to play, but it is different from what they imagine it is. I believe it would be helpful if they would focus their resources and efforts on educating the populations that they are advocating for. As strange as it sounds, there is a need to acquaint people with certain basic principles. Don't break the law. Don't kill anyone. don't assault anyone, don't steal, don't damage property, don't do drugs, don't sell drugs, don't buy drugs, don't molest children, don't drive while intoxicated, etc., etc. If you have an interaction with law enforcement, be respectful. Remember, the officer does not know whether you are armed or whether you have violent intent. So stay calm. I suggest the Sunflower Coalition reimagine its mission and work to educate the public. We already have an advisory board. So I would ask that we consider both sides of the equation. If the police have a responsibility for their actions, so do the civilians. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Raiden Gonzalez, and I am from Salina, Kansas. We can sit here and talk about criminal records all day long. That's fine by me. But here's the real issue on why there's protest in the streets. Racism is built into the DNA of America. And as long as we turn a blind eye to the pain of those suffering under its oppression, we will never, ever escape those origins. The only safeguard people of color have is their right to a defense, and we don't even give them that. Which means that the promise of the civil rights has never been fulfilled due to the failure of our justice system and our public defense system in particular. Jim Crow is alive and kicking, and some of you don't even see it. Some may claim that slavery has ended, but tell that to the inmates who are kept in cages and told that they do not have any rights at all. And some of you know where I'm getting this off of. I'm getting this off of a TV show, How to Get Away with Murder. Annalise Keating, for in fact. With nearly 2.3 million Americans behind bars, the United States jails more individuals than any other country. The public defense system is often described as overworked for one, and two, underpaid. And these two aspects have resulted in serious consequences for those people who can't be well representatives. So I'm asking you, the Salina Police Department, and commissioners and the mayor, stop jailing people for petty crimes, especially people of color. And that's all.
Hello, my name is Drew Hansen. I live in Salina, 1006 South Santa Fe. And just judging by the rhetoric that I've heard from both the police chief and another gentleman that was up here earlier, I have to say I'm quite disappointed. The reasoning for this is that we should not be gloating the fact that a minority group is still being targeted, and these groups, like, even if there are less reports, which we can't judge those reports as relevant, they're irrelevant to us because it's not through a transparent system. I'd like to know, I remember Santiago said something about that before. That's inherently unpatriotic, un-American, and undemocratic, and I'd like to explain my reasoning for that. This nation is founded upon democratic ideals, and the biggest critique of democracy is that it is mob rule. The majority is able to oppress the minority at its will within a democracy. That is, if only we do not have a check and balance to this, that check and balance being civil disobedience, which is what we're presenting. Through civil disobedience, the minority is able to advocate and protect its rights through a system that is not voting. This is the sole way the minority is able to protect itself, but it is corrupted when the majority interferes on said check and balance. Our democracy becomes tyranny when the majority attempts to dictate issues of the minority instead of attending as an ally in the end goal for an egalitarian society. That is what you guys are doing today. Now on to why I strongly support this policy proposal. The proposal contains the elements of what our country was founded upon. Through a citizens review board, the citizens are able to provide a check on the state's monopoly of violence. This is essential in assuring that the government does not overstep its boundaries and interferes on our individual liberties. It makes no sense that a private group with closed doors that even has ties to the police themselves are the group overseeing their very contact. This is a fan club at best. In addition, I'd like to mention something that was said at a previous meeting. Santiago again once mentioned that at the meeting that was at 2 p.m., those who are most affected would likely be working. Well, I think everyone appreciates a 7 p.m. meeting in a larger venue. Thank you for the commission to that. I'd like to once again stress that those who are most affected still face difficulties in being here. They may be working an extra shift, they may be taking care of their children, or considering the fact that they have felt targeted by police in the past, they might be afraid to come here and confront them, which is perfectly understandable as there was about 8 police officers standing in front of the building when I got here. It is also perfectly understandable for people not to want to come speak their minds during a pandemic, and I see many people here who have already started to ignore the sign to wear masks when in the building. If you want to advocate for law and order, at least do not be hypocritical and remain consistent. For those of you that sit out there and think that overviewing our police does not affect you, I'd like to quote my favorite poem. It's the reason I'm here today. First they came for the communists, but I did not speak because I am not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, but I did not speak because I am not a socialist. Then they came for the union workers, but I did not speak because I was not a union worker. And then they came for me, and there was nobody left to speak for me. As someone at a previous meeting said, we know Salina is not St. Louis, Minneapolis, etc. We have a pretty good police department. But it is our community, and the least we can do is hold it to the highest standard possible. That is what we're trying to do. Please accept this proposal. It makes sense and is simple, protects the rights of the minority, and presents us with a choice to adopt something that has the same ideals for which our country was founded upon. This choice also presents us with the opportunity to be on the right or the wrong side of history. Whenever the government strays away from the ideals for which our country was founded upon, history never looks upon it fondly. Please, Commission, let Salina be looked upon fondly in the eyes of history.
Dalton McDowell, City of Salina. I'd like to first thank the Salina Police Department officers that are here tonight that should not have to be here, but they are. Rice County has had 3 officers shot in the last year, and now we're talking about taking the APC out. The last 2 times that Rice County has had an officer shot, Hutchison's Reno County Sheriff's APC responded, and that's how they got those situations under control. Taking the equipment away from Chief Nelson and what he needs to keep his officers safe is a joke. And there are some officers, I'm not going to state names, but have said that if they start taking our weapons away, we're leaving the Salina Police Department and going to a department that cares about their people. And Melissa, I'd love to know why you're so against the Salina Police Department and having weapons when your husband has an arsenal. The Salina Police Department the Salina Police Department needs a SWAT team. I've talked to the KHP, I've talked to retired Kansas Highway Patrol troopers, command staff of Troop C, SWAT guys, and if Troop C is in the middle, so if Troop F, which is Wichita, has an incident, sometimes they get deployed to Wichita. If Troop D has an incident, which is Hayes, they get deployed out there. And if Reno County cannot have their SWAT team available, what SWAT team, what APC, what armored personnel carriers does the council think they're going to get if there's nothing available for an emergency situation? And if Kansas City, if the state patrol sends Kansas City, their Kansas City Bearcat, it's going to take literally 2 to 3 hours before it gets here. I think that the council should all go on the next SWAT call and not have anything and see what these guys have to put up with. You're taking away from you're taking their rights away, their rights to defend themselves. You want this board that has no common sense. You want to take the right for Chief Nelson to say, well, you've screwed up, I can fire you, or I'm going to discipline you, and you want to give it to citizens who have a criminal record. Think about that. Would you want somebody telling you what to do, firing your officers? If you were if you worked in if you were in a hospital setting and you're the CEO and you can fire whoever you need if they do something wrong, or if you can be fixed, you let them figure it out. But you're giving Chief Nelson no option than to let these commissioners, or whoever the board is that most likely Melissa will pick because she's the 2021 mayor, decide who they can fire and what they can. Why would Chief Nelson still be here if he can't do his job? Chief Nelson, I'm glad you're sticking with us. 2023, you'll have a new council that cares about law enforcement.
Due to our outline of our public participation policy, I ask that we please keep the clapping to a minimum so we can continue to move forward and be respectful of everyone. Thank you.
James Bowden, Salina, Kansas. Been from Salina, Kansas since 1987. My family's been from Saline County since 1870. I joined the Sunflower Coalition because this is a group of young people that are working for positive change in Salina. And I want to promote that as much as possible, any chance I get. As Chief Nelson stated, a catalyst is a substance that increases the rate of reaction without itself undergoing any permanent change. The death of George Floyd is now a catalyst, and nothing can change that. What has changed, though, is the reactions of law enforcement and communities all around the United States in reflection of that day's events. It has allowed everyday citizens to speak up and for someone to actually listen to what they have to say in hopes of changing policies that have needed change for some time. I've heard many say, well, what happens in bigger cities doesn't happen here. And in many instances, that's true. They have different demographics, populations, and experiences that we don't have here on the Great Plains of Kansas. What it has allowed us to do is to be proactive and seek out areas for improvement within our own law enforcement. We must continue to question our policies and practices, never allowing a free pass when people's lives are at stake. This is our chance to make sure our law enforcement is accountable to its citizens and that our citizens have a police force that reflect their ideals. Our police force does a good job here in Salina, but there's always room for improvement. And we should seize this opportunity while we have the chance, because if we don't, we may not get another one. Thank you.
David Norland, 608 East Republic. I want to follow up on many of the comments that have been made here, and I don't know if this adds any credibility or not, but I am a former member of the LEAB. I have seen it as it was operating before. That said, I think the most important thing that I would have to convey is that it has been evident for any citizen who has eyes to see or ears to hear. There are a lot of people who are afraid. They are upset. They think that the police might be defunded. They see in that alleged defunding lack of protection for themselves. This is a moment that calls for some deep, resonant, careful, and sharing thinking on all of our parts. The whole idea of having a responsive law enforcement, city commission, and citizenry is that we are all involved in making that happen. It is not us versus them. I repeat, It is not us versus them. It is us. We are the ones, and the commission and the police department are our agents. And only if we can talk together in measured, reasoned, maybe emotional, but not adversarial thinking, that we will make this happen. As I said in an email to the commissioners this week, I think it would be very apparent in these times, and I'm not just talking about Salina, but as James indicates, nationwide, that we look carefully at establishing a citizen review board that has some clout, that ensures that if there is police malfeasance, discrimination, or other unacceptable behavior, that that board be empowered to do so. I had a conversation with Deputy Chief Sean Nelson today, and we talked about, and he told me, which has been mentioned here, that police have come under fire 3 or 4 times in the last 18 months, as many as in the last 18 years, maybe 20. That is the result of a kind of thinking which says that if you have a gun, you have power. That is only so true. You may destroy everything around you with a weapon. You cannot destroy the spirit of people who are coming together to make the best possible lives for themselves. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Kathy Allison from McPherson, Kansas. I'd just like to say thank you for letting me attend tonight. My daughter and granddaughter and I come almost every weekend, and we eat at your restaurants. We buy our food at Walmart and Dillon's, and our clothing in your malls. And we always feel safe. We feel safe with the police officers here. My son was a police officer for the Salina Police Department for 20 years. He was a sergeant when he passed. And I'm proud to say I was Jeremy's mom, and that he was a police officer here in Salina, Kansas. And I pray for all of the Salina Police Department, for all the men and women. I pray for them every night, that God will watch over them and protect them. I just thank you. Thank you all.
Carrie Harp from Salina, Kansas. And yeah. Good. With me? I know it echoes to these in the front. To the back, I could hear so much better. Anyway, I would like to say thank you for commissioners working so hard at trying to get social distancing and for the wipes and everything here. And I would just like to let you know a little bit about my family and the 45 years that I've lived here. I appreciate the input, first of all, that the coalition has tried to share, but I think it gives a view of Salina and our country that is not Salina, and Salina's where we all live. So we need to concentrate on our citizenship here and what we can do. So I oppose some of the proposals. I think some of them are a little more authoritative than they should be with our police department, and the disciplinary actions belong to our chief. My family's lived here 45 years, and my sister and I brought our mother here and our father a number of years ago. Our father's gone, but our mother is going to be 101 this year. So Salina's been very safe for them, and that's why we brought them here. And we have lived here 14 years. She's lived here 14 years. And the police, the fire department helped us with her many times when our father was sick, and even with her. We appreciate the LEAB. And could I ask, is any of the LEAB team members here? Would they at least acknowledge themselves? I'd just like to say thank you so much for the volunteer services that you guys provide and have done for numerous years. Your racial and ethnic problems that we have here, I think they help a lot because they are of mixed races. Anyway, as we go forward in this process, keeping our citizens and the police department safe, working to help Salina be safe, I want to ask our mayors and our future mayor, Ms. Hodges, and each commissioner, plus the police chief and the city manager, to answer a question for me. I understand this may take a minute or two, but I think our citizens here tonight would like to hear your response. This proposal that we have, I feel like our LEAB team has been great and provided the safety in this community that we all have talked about. And you younger ones, you've not been here long enough to experience the safety that we've all had. You have some good input, but years give us a little more input. I also would think that it's an effective system with our LEAB. The members have worked hard and they put in a lot of hours with their volunteer time every other month. And I think they ought to be grandfathered in whatever we do, or stayed on this committee from the years of experience they have. We need that. So with the violence and the damaging businesses and people being abused in all races, and the law and order in so many cities have been overrun. God forbid this ever happens here, but it is possible. So, myself and others would like to know tonight, please, can we trust our commission, our city manager, Chief Nelson, to be fully supportive of all of our officers, as you stated you were, and if at any cost this ever happens, this violence that's happened in other cities comes here, I am asking, and others, would you totally back our police? As taxpayers, we need to know where you stand to protect us. If you had to bring in the National Guard, would you do so?
We're not going to do Q&A tonight. If you would like to talk to Chief Nelson, him and I have had that discussion, and or I would be glad to talk to you afterwards about that. But we're not going to get into the Q&As tonight, so.
Okay. Is this a regular business meeting, or you abide by those rules?
We're just here to listen tonight.
So you can't answer any questions on anything?
We're not going to get into Q&A tonight, so.
Well, you understand that we need to know your safety for this town. I've lived here 45 years, so I think it's a great question, and I would love to talk to you about it. I'll probably ask each one of you down the road in the next few months as Melissa just takes the mayorship next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You do have our email addresses also. They're all available on the City Commission website.
Okay. No, I'll probably come personally.
Okay. Thank you.
Everybody hear me okay? My name is Miranda Bachman. I'm from here in Salina. I have lived here for 30 years. I didn't intend on speaking tonight, but this is the second public forum I've been to, And this is the second time I've been personally called out, so I can appreciate it being at the podium this time. Because I would like to say that a level 4 felony is a non-personal, non-violent crime, and it usually doesn't send you to prison. So fact check, I have not been to prison. Although if I had, I couldn't think of a better person to speak tonight about a CRB and demilitarizing the police, because they are the ones that are most affected by it. If we do not have a CRB that has someone that holds our police department accountable, it's nothing. You have a check without a balance. You have an LEAB who has no authority over our police department at all. If something were to happen and they investigated themselves and found out that they were doing something wrong, it would be up to themselves to do whatever they wanted. We would have literally no say in what happens with our police department or that officer that was there. So I just wanted to say that while we're talking about education and while we're talking about people who should be educated, it should not be the 20% of black people that take up our population in our jail. It should not be the black people who are 7% more likely to be arrested in this town for consumption of marijuana, even though the consumption rates are exactly the same. So I just wanted to say that banning the 1033 program, in my opinion, is our best option. That training dummy that we have acquired at our $6 million training facility was acquired by private funds. So if we think that we really need an armored vehicle, there are funds to pay for it. Also, in that $6 million training facility, I have yet to hear about any new policies for bias training or any kind of racial profiling training or anything like that. So that is something that I would like to hear furthermore about, because we do have this new training facility, and I think it's an important message to say that we are not spending all of our money on militarizing our police. Thank you.
I have some pictures I'd like to give you. Can I bring those up? Do you want me to give them to you now?
We'll do that after the meeting.
Okay. You hear me okay? All right. I have several concerns with the presentation of the Sunflower Coalition. I would like to know, why is the Civic Commission even considering this group of recommendations to restructure or reimagine? That word reimagine is used often. Our current Law Enforcement Advisory Board, which is referred to as the LEAB. I'm concerned about restructure their position. The Sunflower Coalition, by its own admission on its Facebook, facebook.com, states that they are a human rights organization. But with the profile picture on that page, there is a fist clenched. The Black Lives Matter fist image is what's presented, and it's used, stating to stop killing black people, no racism, silence is violence, Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace, I can't breathe on the wrist of that fist clenched. Then it states, I can't breathe, defund the police, and justice for George Floyd. This is the representation in a political group known as Black Lives Matter, and it's a global organization that they proudly state that they are a Marxist, socialist, social movement that advocates for nonviolent civil disobedience. And by civil, they're stating it's a peaceful protest and nonviolent resistance. The founders of this political group, one in particular, in 2013 as the founder, is Alicia Garza. She encourages black resistance using the phrase in Time Magazine's article on objective, and its objective was to dismantle systems by taking them apart and to reimagine our police systems. The Sunflower Coalition identifies with this group. The Sunflower Coalition also have a timeline photo in which they make the statement, and I quote, "We support the sentiments made by the Kansas City football players during their September 10th game." It states, "All of us to reimagine and create a world where these ideals flourish." And then the ideals that are listed.
About another 20 seconds or so, if you would, please.
I'm sorry?
About another 20 seconds or so.
Okay. So the ideals that are listed are support equality, end racism, justice for all, end police brutality, to choose unconditional love, and to believe that Black Lives Matter, and that it takes all of us. All of us here, these ideals are addressed in the bylaws of our LEAB, Law Enforcement Advisory Board, and their vision and mission statement and bylaws address each one of these concerns. Our police chief, with years of excellent training and qualification and years of experience, gives me confidence in his work in Salina. I have been a resident here for 45 years, and I feel very comfortable and protected here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dolores Williamson.
Could you move the microphone up a little closer?
Okay, yes. Is that better?
Yes.
Is that better? Okay, my name is Dolores Williamson. I am clergy. I live in Salina, Kansas. I'm also retired National Guard, 22 years in the Kansas Army National Guard. Retired as Sergeant First Class. And I want to say, I mean, there's a lot of conversation about Black Lives Matters and all that kind of stuff, and I don't have any problem. Riding, I have a fear that while I'm on these roads with no shoulder, that someone may just come by and decide that, well, there she is, and there I go. And so that is a real fear that I deal with. There is a fear for my son, who lives in a major city, that if I call the police for something just to do a wellness check on him, my concern is, are they going to react just because he is a black male? I have that fear. for him, not only where he is in a major city right now, but even if he decides to return back to Kansas at some point. My hope, and what I hear from Chief Nelson's, as he has dug into this, is that I don't think anybody's taken anything away from what your proposal is saying on the 1033, but that it's going to have more transparency, and I'm all for that. I'm all for being better in the community that I live in or that I reside in, and how can I make things better? How can I listen reflectively to hear what the real issue is? And so I hope that as we continue to study this and as we continue to look at what the Sunflower Coalition has presented to us, as well as other ideas in the communities, that we can do better policing in this size of a community. I want to address Chief Nelson. I like the quote that you have from Sir Robert Peel from 1829, and I begin to think about what was my family doing in 1829, but I begin to look at this, the research on Sir Robert Peel, and there's another quote that I have shared with the county commission, or the city commission, and I want to just read it because I like this. It says, "The police are the public, and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interests of community welfare and existence." And I see that as we are all together trying to do better, and that we are all accountable to someone, whether in this life or the next. And I am a preacher, so I think about the next life as well, and how I represent the gospel now, and how I encounter my Savior or my God, and so that I am accountable for all that I do. So I hope that whatever we do here, if there's another study, that we will continue to say what's best for this community, for all the citizens. And I just hope, and there's one of your officers who said that he would be willing to ride his bike with me because I'm afraid to ride. He said when he's on his day off, all I got to do is give him a call and we'll ride together. So there's all kinds of relationship building that needs to take place in our community, because even people don't talk to me. Yep. So I'm done. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
My name is Brad Sherbert. I live here in Salina. First off, Chief, thank you for the job that you and your men and women do. It's greatly appreciated. I grew up 30 miles from here, little small town, 600 people. I was taught, you don't do nothing wrong, the cops ain't gonna mess with you. You know what? For the most part in my life, cops ain't messed with me. I've got black friends, I've got Hispanic friends, I've got Asian friends. Half of them, of all colors, have a problem with the police. The other half don't. The half that do have a problem with them are the half that's doing stupid stuff. They're dealing, they're buying, they're driving around without tags, they're driving around without taillights. They are breaking the law. Well, the cop's only on me because I'm black. No, the cop is on you because you are breaking the law. Don't do stupid stuff, and the cops will leave you alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Bryce Jones. I live at 444 South 10th Street. And I'd just like to say, I'll try to keep this brief, but we need to strike a balance between and come to terms with the realities that with local policing and policing at large, some people feel more safe, but it also, through certain actions, people can feel threatened. And I hope that we value the dignity of all voices enough to take action and listen to those that feel threatened. And whether that is a perceived threat or in many cases, an actual threat, take that to heart and advocate for all voices effectively. And I think the Citizens Review Board would be a good way to do that. And I think that's a start. And I think looking at not only our use of force policies, but displays of force would be a start. And not to say that we don't do that to a degree already, but that's something that the Citizens Review Board could do to really more effectively help the citizens feel less threatened, but also the officers do their job more effectively as we foster a more beneficial relationship. It's about safety and dignity of all involved, and I think the Citizens Review Board is something that should be advocated for, so it makes me proud, honestly, to see you all here considering this seriously. As far as the 1033 program is concerned, I do feel that if there are, whether it's a vehicle or whatever the case may be, we have a citizenry that does support its police officers, so that's something that could be funded. And we could advocate, or the officers could advocate for those materials by making that case. Ultimately, I'll just leave with, again, this notion that the desire to value all voices and hear and take action is one that values dignity and people's lives and their livelihoods and their ability to move freely, and their right to move freely being one that is truly free. And I think that's something that we need to address. And again, this is a jumping off point. And so I'm encouraged by these discussions. I'm encouraged with the seriousness that you're taking these issues, not that they weren't already taken seriously. But I think it is a priority. It should be a priority that the Citizen Review Board be formed, and at the very least, the 1033 program is provided oversight by the Commission. Thank you for your time and all of your service.
My name is Lisa Graham. Had I known about this meeting earlier, I would have come prepared. I learned about this meeting this morning. I just want to say that I have walked both sides. I was a sheriff's deputy, 1976, I think it was, and I have been incarcerated as a criminal in Topeka Correctional Facility. When I approached the commissioners about my problems with the Salina Police Department this past year, no one informed me about the committee, but now that I think about it, my aunt helped to form that committee. Geraldine Briscoe was part of the people that helped form the committee for oversight on the police department. I have some testimony about the police department, and I have some testimony which I think I can clear up some things for some citizens by giving you a look on both sides. As a sheriff's deputy, I was introduced to guns. I had never had any experience with a gun. They took me to the shooting range. So that was my first experience. And then I left the sheriff's office one way or the other. But anyway, I never had any criminal intent. I've never done anything that I believe that I should have been arrested for. My crime was attempted murder of law enforcement officers. I never attempted to kill any officer. The officer that stated that I attempted to kill him also was rewarded a medal for saving my life. So how do you save somebody's life and that person is attempting to kill you? I don't think the story should end without both sides being heard. And one day, I'll voice that side so that the world knows. Anyway, since I have returned to Salina, I've met with the police chief, who decided I needed to be patted down and searched before he spoke with me. I also moved to an area where people were doing a lot of criminal behavior, and I reported this to the police, and the more I reported it, the more I was harassed, and it was on video. The police refused to do anything. They refused to help me. They shot BB guns at me. They shot artillery-type fireworks at me. They cut my tires. They set their dogs loose on me. And I approached the city because the police wouldn't do anything for me. And none of the commissioners ever mentioned the review board. None of the commissioners ever spoke to the police chief questioning why there was no help for me.
About another 30 seconds, if we could, please.
Me?
Yeah, you.
I'm done?
Yeah, about 30 seconds.
Okay. Anyway, I don't feel anger because there's police officers that have been good to me. I've had to call them on an occasion. And I also wanted to say that I was on a board with Julie McKenna prior to any criminal charges. And on that board, we discussed and we initiated the bands that you put onto your legs so that people can be tracked and they don't have to serve in the jail. I think that the city wanting to build a larger jail, I think that if they instrumented the bands and the people with the lesser crimes were left outside, there wouldn't be a need for a larger jail. I think that...
Lisa, that...
Okay.
We've had enough...
One more comment.
We're not
I think that if the money was taken and skating rings or something being built, there wouldn't be a need for a larger jail. Educate the kids, give the kids something to do, and they won't be selling drugs.
Thank you.
Anyway,
thank
you for your time.
Hi, my name is Andy Hansen. I've lived in Salina since 1978. For a few years in college, but for the most part, my whole life I've lived in Salina. First, I want to thank you all for having this forum, having it at 7 when more of us could come. Thank the police department for the job that they do. I do appreciate and respect the job of the police department. I have to say, though, that in response to some of the comments that have been made, I've always felt safe here too, and it's nice to hear that some older white people have felt pretty safe here, and that you only have to worry about the police when you do bad things, but comments like that just ignore the reality that we live in. And that reality is that there are people who didn't do anything wrong and they've died at the hands of police. There are people who are afraid for their lives for good reason. And it's not just when you do something bad that you have to worry about it. And I just have to say that if you're one of the people who denies that that is the current reality, you're part of the problem that perpetuates it and keeps us from ever realizing the dream that MLK spoke about, the civil rights movement. You're the reason racism still exists, because you ignore that it exists. Now, I've had a job since I was 14. I've always worked. I've never had a job where life and death was, well, okay, I was a pizza delivery driver. I can't say that I never had life and death in my hands. But that's why I respect what the police do. They put themselves out there every day. But in none of my jobs, never have I been able to mess up and then turn to a group of my friends and best supporters and say, am I good? And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that we don't allow a fox to guard the hen house, that we have a review board made up of citizens instead of supporters, just to hold basic accountability over something as important as a job that does hold life and death in its hands every moment of every day that they go out there. That's why we respect that you do it. It's also why we respect and want the accountability that goes along with a job of that magnitude. So that's all. Thank you.
My name is Haley Helser. I'm a resident of Salina. I've been here for darn near 39 years now. I just want to thank Chief Nelson and the commissioners. I think Chief Nelson made a great point that we're going to be a better community for having this conversation. I don't see this as a defunding the police situation. I think that this is a transparency and building trust between the police department and the citizens. I believe that they are, our police department, they are our citizens. And I believe David Norland stated, it's not us against them. We are all us. Throughout the presentations I was watching, I want to say that I wholeheartedly believe everything that you presented, Chief, because, you went into great detail and you put a lot of work into that, and I appreciate that. You did admit that there was some shortcomings and you're willing to work with people to close those gaps. And I think that the negotiations back and forth have been quite well for everybody. As for the 1033 program, I don't agree with Salina pulling out of it for the same reason that you don't. We may need it. But on that same token, I believe that that's why we also need a CRB program. It's not, I don't want to say when it happens, I want to say if it happens. Because if something were to happen, there could be accountability. And building that trust within the community would allow more of that accountability there, a lot more transparency. One of your slides also stated the purpose of this is just better transparency, oversight, and accountability. And I want to see more of that in our community so that there's not a win. Thank you.
My name's Steve Stockham. I have been a Salina resident for 28 years. I think I speak for a great many people here in that we support our local law enforcement. We support our state and federal law enforcement. In fact, we all understand that we cannot have a civil society without laws. That being said, tearing down what is already here and building it back up, something different, fixing what isn't broken, is not the answer. People have mentioned that they're afraid, fear. And I can understand that. They're passionate about it. There have been instances. But the training that goes into local law enforcement is, I'm not even certain what all it takes, but I know there is a vast amount of training that has to go into it, and that there is continual training. When there is a problem that it is addressed, they find a method to train for that to correct what may be a deficiency. Are there bad apples? Yes, it happens. We've seen them on TV. Unfortunately, there is a wave going through this country right now where it's become almost a mania, and the punching bag right now is law enforcement. Systemic racism and police brutality are phrases that we hear almost on a daily basis now. People are all afraid. We're supposed to defund this and do away with that. And I'm here to say that I really believe that the best thing to do is to support our local law enforcement, give them the resources that they need so that they can do their own particular education, whatever they need for their training. The advisory board that oversees them has been very fine, and like I said, the engineer's credo: if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Lauren Mantle, Salina, Kansas. Here's a quote from Sheriff Kokanowski. I'm not saying it's all on the public's shoulders. Some of it is because of the way law enforcement has treated people. It's become, man, I'm the cop, and what I say is going to happen, and that's all there is to it. So we need to take some of this authority away from law enforcement, their attitude. Second thing I'm going to talk about, people have said law enforcement has a deadly job in the United States. They don't. I've got a print in here. It was printed December 31st, 2019. 11 deadliest jobs in America. Law enforcement is not on it. So you don't have a dangerous job. So you need to get rid of that concept. That's about all I had to say.
My name is Lainey Myers. I live around the Gypsum area. I'm 16, going on 17 years old. I believe it coming from one of the younger generations that maybe it might be a relief to the police itself. The police at my school, they treat us all equally. We are all fairly treated. They are actually very fun to be around. They are really cool people. And my childhood was not exactly a clean slate. My parents did go through some hardships. But even throughout that, I have gained a lot of respect for the police community. I understand that they are people. So many things go on, and you guys really get the brunt end of it, and you shouldn't. It's not, of course, coming from me, I understand a young white girl. I understand it may not be the most appropriate thing to come from, but technically in this community, I see that the police treat us all fairly equally, not so much the people. People are the ones that typically are the ones to hate or judge one another. The police are usually the ones to see everything fairly. Not once has a school incident ever happened, and have they ever pointed to either a specific race of person or anybody in particular in my school that has not had a background in order to be looked at that way. So I just wanted to thank the police community for everything that they do, and I tried to be one of the last ones to come up to maybe end on a good note. And thank you for everything that you guys have done.
Hi, Tammy Cromer. I've lived in Saline County my entire life. I was debating the whole meeting about talking, but I think people have forgotten. All I keep hearing repeatedly from Sunflower, and the police brought it up, that there were 3 cases of police shootings. What people have seemed to have forgotten is the victims of those, and we are victims of those. This is my family. It was his mother who was murdered. And I addressed this with a member of the Sunflower Coalition who proceeded to tell me that facts weren't important. Well, I don't want a board in charge of our police officers who doesn't think that facts are important. I told them the facts of the case. It wasn't important. Linda mattered, and she mattered to all of us. And what the police did, I can't thank them enough. Unfortunately, she was lost to us, but I am thankful that none of the police officers were hurt. I am sorry that the individual they shot died, although there actually should have been a lot more that happened besides that. But the police officers, we couldn't be more thankful. And our family has actually had some bad experiences with the police over the years. I mean, little things. And, you know, they're just human, and we have talked to them since then, and we've addressed things. But when somebody literally tells me repeatedly that the facts don't matter, I don't even know where to go with that. So if we're going to go to a citizen board and you're going to tell them what's going on and they're going to say the facts don't matter. You know what I was told about the most recent thing? They should have just let them go. There shouldn't be any shootings. They should have just let them go, chase them later. What if somebody got hurt? Well, that doesn't matter because they might not have, but they might have. Those are the kind of things that I've been dealing with just this week. That's what I woke up to on a Sunday morning, was my mother-in-law's case being used inappropriately because there were victims in that. He wasn't the victim. We were the victims. Nobody cares about, nobody in that situation cared about us or came to us and asked us about any of that before they started using it. And I just want you to know that facts do matter. It's got to be more than just, I'm going to be jaded because I've got some facts of this case. You should want the facts. You shouldn't just want one side or the other. You should want both sides of the situation and what actually happened. Because if you're just getting one side, you are completely jaded, and that is exactly the situation I was dealing with when I was told my side didn't matter. My mother-in-law's facts, the facts of her life didn't matter. She was a nice person, so be it. The other person, well, you know, who cares that he stabbed her to death multiple times? He should have just been, you know, let go or shot in the leg or something like that. I can't imagine what it's like to be a police officer and see the scene that they had to see that day, because we seen just part of it. So I can't even imagine what they went through, and they cannot even imagine what we felt for them on that day as much as we did for our mother-in-law. So I just want you to know that I appreciate the police for all they do. I know you're not perfect, none of us are perfect, but no matter what we do, if we cannot come together and decide that facts of everything on both sides and everything matters, then it's really pointless. Thank you.
I enjoyed the "Oh God" that I heard out there somewhere. That was cute. Hello, mi nombre es Santiago Vasquez, and I am now a resident of Lawrence, Kansas, because I go to school there now. And tomorrow I will be a graduate of the Citizens Academy, so I'm excited to have cookies and tea with you, Mr. Nelson, tomorrow. I think that'll be a good note to end this all on. I hate to end on a note of policy, but I know we've discussed a lot of big issues out here, and I did want to bring it back to something that I thought was kind of important in the way that the proposal was presented today. I do think that the new CRB, when it comes into place, needs to have some sort of enforcement mechanism. The problem with the current LEAB, and this is something that I've talked about with LEAB members, is that their recommendations are toothless. If the CRB finds that something is deficient or that something needs to be fixed, what recourse do they have to make that happen? What's the point of having a board if it can't do anything to change what's wrong?
if you're just going to create another CRB that's exactly the same as the LEAB, then what's the point? The point is improvement. That is not an improvement. And since I have a little bit of time left, I would like to address some of those other issues that I've heard tonight. I heard a lot of people talking about how much they care about the police and how safe they feel in our community. And I think it's also important to remember that not everybody has that experience. Just because you feel safe does not mean that I feel safe. I'm glad that you feel safe. I want to feel safe too. I'm sure my parents do too. My parents told me when I first started doing this kind of stuff to be very careful about what would happen to me for speaking out. We are afraid in this community. There are people who are afraid in this community, and those people's fears are valid. They're worth addressing. Just because they aren't in the majority, just because they don't show up in the statistics of how many complaints there are, doesn't mean that automatically they don't exist or don't count. If something were to happen to me, if the police were to do something to me, under the current system, I am expected to go to them to complain and expect to believe that their internal investigation, the internal investigation done by the people who would have wronged me in the situation, would be fixed by them. That is not an encouragement for people to engage. That is not an encouragement for people to hold their community accountable for their safety. What we need is an external mechanism for those people to find a group of their peers where they feel safe, people who have their interests in mind, who have their experiences. You want to see both sides of the argument? That's both sides.
Hello, my name is Peter Paganelli, and I've lived in Salina for 14 years. And for 27 years, I was out in California. I knew police officers. I lived in their house. It's a very dangerous job. No ifs or ands, but I know one who was shot 11 times and killed trying to do his service. And listening to this meeting, and the whole point of this is I'm listening to the news. There's riots in all these cities, and there's a commission that wants to take away a riot vehicle. That makes no sense. That's free. And there are laws, there are lawyers, there are cameras. If the police officer breaks the law, then the person who was violated can take that to court. We have courts, we have judges. We have no reason to have any commission stand over the police and try to tell them what to do. We have laws in place. It's just a bunch of bureaucracy. I appreciate the Salina Police Department. I've had very little interaction, but I've been stopped a few times for a turn signal or a light being out. They have been very professional, and they have been very to the point. I've never had a problem with them, and I really appreciate and I feel very safe in this community because they're on the job. I see them working. That's all I have to say.
Okay, we'd like to thank everyone for their comments. We will be working on this issue, and we'll try to keep the public informed. We're hoping to have something in place by the end of the year. Thank you for coming out, and everyone have a safe drive home. Thank you.